It's time for my final watch review of 2023, and it happens to be this very pretty skeletonized watch from French brand Charlie Paris. But firstly, why final review? It's only 8 December by the time this goes live. Well, I'm often appalled to hopefully make it all the way up to Everest Base Camp. So if you're interested to follow along, my Instagram handle is in the description. Skeletonized watches are often a luxury item that few of us can afford. Brands tend to go all out with various fancy materials, and they're often more of a statement piece than a functional watch. And legibility often suffers big time since there's no real dial for the hands to contrast against. But most of all, they're priced out of reach. Firstly, this model, which is called the Initial Skeleton, is priced very much within reach at €385. That is about $420 or 620 Australian dollars. In that price range, you can find plenty of other watches, but few like this one. So we're already ahead here if you'd like to obtain your first skeletonized watch. This is my second watch from the brand, and the first one I liked very much. If you fancy the brand but not this particular model, I can't recommend the Concordia enough, which is another reasonably priced and very attractive watch that's a bit more traditional. One small thing with skeletonized watches is that the water resistance is often compromised slightly due to the construction, I assume. This one is at 3 ATM or 30 meters, so it has meant that during a slightly rainy spring here in Melbourne, I've had to wait to film my outside shots. Usually weather doesn't matter that much since most watches tend to have great water resistance these days, and cameras and lenses are as tough as nails. But this one I would be careful with in the rain, and that's normal for dressy watches of course. Anyway, let's get stuck into the bits and bobs of the Initial. Another excellent feature with the Initial is that the dimensions are not too small but also not too big, which can't be said for dressy and skeletonized watches in general. The diameter is exactly 40mm and lug to lug is 45.5mm. Lug width is 20mm and I measure it at 12.1mm thick. The weight is a very slight 62 gram, and of course the water resistance is 30 meters. But don't take this swimming, please. Some of the most fun you can have with a loop or a macro lens is getting up close to a mechanical watch movement. But first to what's left of a traditional dial. The printed word mark sits at 12, and so does the gorgeous stork logo that I'm a big fan of. Both hold up to close scrutiny, no problem. Around the open movement, we see various discs that form both the indices that frame the logo around 12 and also gives the appearance of the indices having been carved out from a recessed disc. These are all polished and makes the seconds markers on the rehort nicely. A couple of them are ever so slightly off-center, but it's only annoying people like me on YouTube that would even notice this. It's such a tiny deviation. Some cool details are the carved out circles that highlight the balance wheel and even a small half circle cut from what is the small seconds hand style. And this cutout enhances the view of one of the synthetic jewels, which of course plays the function of a bearing to reduce friction, and it's not just a pretty detail. It's a nice approach to a skeletonized dial. I normally cover movements later, but since it's hard to avoid here, it's the automatic Miyota 82S7, which you can expect better than -20 to +40 seconds accuracy per day. In my experience, this is often very conservative, so don't stress about those specs. Power reserve is 42 hours. This is a pretty straightforward movement, not a showpiece, and that's obvious when you get close with very little flair or polish. But you can still see the gorgeous palette fork and escape wheel that is such a fascinating dance to watch. Getting this close, you can keep watching things in there for ages if you're a watch nerd like me, and you likely are if you're here. The hands can best be described as there. If I was asked what time it is when wearing this, I'd have to ask the requester to give me a moment so I could position the watch in the right light, and slightly side on, so I could give him the best approximation I could muster. No, legibility is not great, and whilst the polished hands and blued small seconds hands are nicely done, and I have no real complaints other than a small mark on the blued seconds hand, it's basically very hard to tell the time with polished hands against a white dial that's not really there. This is a dress watch and a statement piece. I have friends that wear watches, and I kid you not, can't tell the time easily on a standard 12-hour dial. So you make your own mind up how important the challenging legibility is to you. The fixed bezel that holds the sapphire crystal with some AR coating is nice with no color casts. The case and lugs, or horns as the French call them appropriately here, are all polished as you'd expect on a dress watch. And the small but manageable and unsigned crown is push-pull again as you'd expect. Overall, these details are best described as getting out of the way for the dial and movement to shine. Some clever sloping on the back means that it looks thinner than it really is, and this makes a see-through back possible. Here you can view the skeletonized and signed rotor, and even more small details such as what exactly happens when you wind the crown, not to mention when you pull the crown and stop the movement. We are also used to this function in our hobby, that it's nice to see the mechanics of it in action. You can pick many different types of straps when you order yours. I happen to think that blue and white is a brilliant combination, but you have many other color options too. This is an extremely soft and pliable strap that is signed and comfortable to use. I'd appreciate something a bit more special on the buckle than a standard polished affair, but each to their own. They are quick release, so using your own leather options is an easy swap, but best use another strap with quick release since the lugs are not drilled, and the polish here means you want to be pretty careful with a strap changing fork. There is no lume on this watch, and I think that's a miss. Sure, it's not traditional for a dress watch, but it would help legibility slightly with a thin sliver on the hands of lume. So that's something to consider in the future perhaps. I love the fact that I can buy a skeletonized and very pretty watch at a price that's reasonable from a French brand that's not snobbish and just want to be considered as a stylish option that you can afford to put on your wrist. If the legibility issue is important to you, consider their open heart version, which is not as open, or even the solid dial options. There are many, and they are all mostly priced well. If you happen to visit Paris, you can also go and chat to the brand directly with the address on the website, and that's not something that all small brands can offer. I have enjoyed my loan and send this back slightly reluctantly, but I would not hesitate to buy one in future for myself or my family, and I can't give a higher recommendation than that. So what do you think? Please let me know in the comments, and I'm very much looking forward to returning in 2024. Thank you very much for watching as usual.